They never told us the truth about these books. They existed. Our ancestors read them, copied them, and guarded them under the threat of death. But then, they vanished. Crossed out of the canon, locked away in monastic vaults, burned in the fires of the Inquisition. They were given the name apocrypha, which means hidden. And yet, how strange that the very hidden books describe today's reality with the greatest accuracy. They warned of global alliances, of digital control, of a mark without which no one could buy or sell. They spoke of books of life, where the names of people are written, and books of death, where those erased by the system disappear. And none of this was written yesterday. These texts are 2, sometimes even 3,000 years old. If this is true, then the entire history of mankind is a lie. We live in a world where official voices speak of progress. Politicians call new treaties historic. Scientists praise digital identity as convenience. The media convinces us a new world is being born. But when we open the ancient scrolls, we see a very different picture. The archives reveal another truth. They say, every empire that set itself above the law of God fell. Every system built on control ended in catastrophe. Every civilization that dared to play with heaven was answered with war and ruin. The prophets warned of this thousands of years ago. And today, for the first time, we will weave these forbidden texts into one single canvas. Imagine the October scroll, a symbolic archive opening right now. Why October? Because this month carries fractures of history. In October 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution. In October 1929, the Great Depression. In October 1973, the Yom Kippur War. And in October again, new alliances, new wars, and new signs of control. The shadows of ancient empires rise once more. Look around. The United States and China are building digital empires. Europe pushes forward electronic passports. Israel and Arab states sign agreements called peace, while behind them lie arms deals and control of resources. Russia wages war under the mask of imperial myths. And ordinary people are told, it is for your safety. Official statements are only a curtain. When we read these forbidden texts, it feels like they were written as reports from the future. They speak not only of the collapse of ancient empires, but also of the birth of new ones we now witness. The leaders of the world knew, and concealed it. That is why I invite you on a journey. Not a regular history lesson, but an investigation. We will unroll the scrolls one by one. We will hear what the Book of Enoch says about the fall of angels and the rise of new gods of technology. We will see how the Apocalypse of Ezra describes an eagle devouring nations, and why this image mirrors modern empires. We will open the Qumran scrolls about the war of the sons of light and the sons of darkness, and ask why today they sound like a global division of power. We will explore the Book of Jubilees, which speaks of an alternative calendar, and understand the meaning of a new order of time where a person can be erased from the system. We will reveal the Apocalypse of Baruch, foretelling the end of empires, and compare it with the crises of modern states. And finally, we will face the Apocrypha about the Messiah and the mark, without which no one will survive in a world of control. This document changes everything. And now I ask you, what if we are living in the very days these books foretold? What if the forbidden texts the official church once called dangerous, are in fact the real script of history? Think, in the 21st century humanity once again creates global registries. We launch digital passports. We allow systems to decide who may buy, who may travel, who may receive aid. Is this not the modern version of the books of life and death? When history repeats, the end draws near. Before we begin unrolling the scrolls, I ask you for something simple. Click like and subscribe to this channel. It is not just a button, it is a sign that you too are searching for the truth others try to hide. In the next episodes we will go even deeper, and you will not want to miss them. Because now you are about to witness an investigation that will change the way you see history, politics, and even your own life. This archive was hidden. But today it is revealed. And what we will see is not legend. It is the mirror of our time. There are texts that even the boldest theologians fear to read aloud. One of them is the Book of Enoch. It was written long before the time of Jesus. Early Christians read it, the Apostle Jude referred to it, and in the Ethiopian church it was considered sacred. But when the time came to form the biblical canon, this text was erased. It was declared dangerous, because it spoke too much about the end of history. What was so terrifying within it? The Book of Enoch tells a story that sounds like myth, yet strangely echoes our modern reality. It speaks of the sons of God who descended to earth. They brought humanity knowledge and technology. They taught how to work with metal, forge weapons, craft ornaments, control the elements. They revealed the secrets of war and magic. At first it seemed like a blessing. But the result was that humanity became a slave to its own desires and fears. Society turned into chaos, where the strong enslaved the weak, and knowledge itself became a tool of control. The church erased this text for a reason. Because it looked too much like the future. Think about it. Today we live in a world where technological elites hold the fate of millions in their hands. They create artificial intelligence, launch satellite systems, collect the biometric data of billions. They promise it is for convenience, for progress. But was it not the same when the sons of God first taught mankind the art of metal and of war? The Book of Enoch declares, knowledge divorced from the law of God becomes poison. What grants power also opens the door to self-destruction. In one passage, Enoch describes how the fallen angels give humanity marks. Those marks become symbols of power and control. Then, they were symbolic. Today, they are real, digital passports, QR codes, biometric fingerprints. Without these marks, modern people cannot buy a ticket, cross a border, or receive medical care. Is that not the very parallel Enoch described? In today's airports, we place our hand or finger on a scanner. A camera reads our face. The system decides whether to let us through. This is no longer fiction. This is daily life. And this is exactly what the forbidden texts warned about. Now look at geopolitics. The United States and China compete to be the first to build a total system of artificial intelligence that knows everything about everyone. Europe introduces digital passports required for travel. Israel tests biometric databases for its citizens. The Middle East becomes a testing ground for drones and experimental technologies. All these threads weave into a single pattern, control through knowledge. Enoch wrote that in the last days the books will be opened in heaven, and the secrets will be revealed. Perhaps it was meant as a metaphor. But today, data clouds, literally clouds, store every detail of our lives. They have become the new books of life and death. The archives show a very different picture. Official history tells us mankind is marching toward progress. But the Book of Enoch presents another script. It says, every knowledge has a cost. And when it is used for domination, catastrophe follows. That is what happened in the days of the flood. And that is what can happen again. Imagine. Ancient peoples admired the angels who gave them hidden secrets. Today, millions admire new technologies, smartphones, apps, digital currencies. Yesterday we chose for ourselves. Today algorithms decide for us. Yesterday we possessed knowledge. Today knowledge possesses us. Everything we were told about progress turns out to be a trap. Why did the church remove this text? Because it revealed too much. It showed that humanity always repeats the same cycle: knowledge, pride, control, collapse. And if people realized this, they would begin questioning the very foundations of power, science, and even religion. That is why the Book of Enoch was erased. But it could not be hidden. It survived in Ethiopia. And now, as we read its pages, we see it is not myth. It is a report from the future. World leaders knew, but concealed it. We live in an age where wars are no longer only about territory. They are about information. Whoever controls information, controls the world. That is exactly what Enoch declared. And that is why his book was forbidden. And now, the central question. If humanity once walked this path and ended in the flood, then how will our repetition end? What catastrophe will answer our obsession with technology? I cannot give the final answer. But I see the parallels. And they are far too clear to ignore. This document changes everything. The name of the prophet Ezra is familiar to anyone who has opened the Bible. Yet few know that beyond the well-known books, there exists another text, called the Apocalypse of Ezra, or the fourth book of Ezra. It is one of the most mysterious apocrypha, written after the destruction of Jerusalem in the year 70. Within it lies a series of visions that seem to describe not only the tragedy of that time, but also scenarios that echo our present. Why was this text removed? Because it spoke too directly about the fall of empires. It revealed that the history of the world is a chain of catastrophes, where one superpower devours another, until the final kingdom comes. For those who built their politics on the illusion of stability, these lines sounded like a sentence. In his central vision, Ezra sees a massive eagle. It has many wings, but one by one they disappear. The eagle grows, conquers nations, and yet in the end, it dies. The meaning is clear: empires are not eternal. They are born, expand, weaken, and collapse. It may seem a metaphor of the past. But look closer. In our own age, the eagle is the symbol of one of the greatest modern nations. And that nation, like the empires of old, faces crises that corrode it from within. Wars, economic turmoil, political division. All of it looks like a replay of ancient prophecy. Ezra saw the eagle's wings fall one after another. Do we not see the same today, as even the strongest alliances crack under the weight of inner conflict and external threats? The real reason was never told in textbooks. In another vision, Ezra speaks of peoples perishing from famine, war, and plague. He warns, when disasters strike the earth, it is only the beginning, for the true battle lies ahead. And once again, the parallels are striking. Our world faces a food crisis. Entire nations depend on exports of grain and oil. Wars block supply routes. Global pandemics force governments to impose controls no one could have imagined only a few years ago. It all feels like a rehearsal of what the prophet described. The Apocalypse of Ezra is remarkable because it gives not only images, but geography. It describes the end of time, when nations clash in a great war and the world divides into two camps. This is no abstract vision. It looks like a map of global alliances forming right now. NATO and the European Union on one side. China, Russia, and Iran on the other. And between them, neutral countries, uncertain which side to choose. The prophets warned of this thousands of years ago. Ezra's vision carried one unique feature: he saw not only collapse, but the birth of a new kingdom. He declared that after the fall of the eagle, a lion will come, symbol of God's judgment. It means the story of human empires will end, and in their place another order will rise. Politically, it reads as a sentence upon all who attempt to build global unions while ignoring the law of God. For even if their power appears unshakable, the end still draws near. Everything we were told about peace agreements was a lie. Now imagine the news through the lens of this prophecy. When politicians stand before cameras to sign treaties, they call it a new era of peace. But look closer, and you see something else entirely: These treaties are not guarantees of security, but steps toward greater crisis. History repeats. Alliances that seem strong become snares. Ezra wrote of the eagle that devoured nations but in the end destroyed itself. Today we see modern empires devouring one another through sanctions, information wars, and arms races. And with each step, we move closer to the very edge the prophets foretold. The archives show a very different picture. Why was this text hidden? Because it shattered the central myth, the myth of endless progress. For empires it was convenient to persuade their peoples, tomorrow will be better than yesterday. Ezra said the opposite, tomorrow will be worse than today if you do not change your path. That sounded like a dangerous sermon. And that is why his book became an apocryphon. Yet despite every effort to conceal it, it survived. And now we can read lines that sound not like an ancient text, but like a journalistic report on our present. Official statements are nothing but a curtain. So ask yourself, what if we already live in the world where the eagle has spread its wings and begun to devour nations? What if we already watch its feathers fall, one by one? What if we now stand exactly where the people of Ezra's time once stood, on the boundary between the old empire and a new age? I do not give the final answer. I only show the parallels. But one thing is clear, the Apocalypse of Ezra was forbidden for a reason. Because it described too precisely the script of the end we now see with our own eyes. This document changes everything. In the year 1947, near the Dead Sea, a shepherd stumbled upon a clay jar. Inside were scrolls more than 2,000 years old. That was the beginning of the discovery of the Qumran manuscripts, the library of a mysterious community once called the Essenes. This discovery could have turned the history of the Bible upside down. Among the scrolls were texts that never made it into the canon. Among them, one stood out above all, the war of the sons of light against the sons of darkness. The text reads like a military manual for the end of days. It describes armies, their banners, tactics, even the number of soldiers. But that was not the main point. What mattered most was the worldview of the Essenes. They saw history not as the rise and fall of civilizations, but as an eternal battlefield between two forces that could never coexist. Why were these scrolls hidden? Because they spoke too plainly. Conflict is the foundation of the world. And this conflict was not political, it was spiritual. In the 20th century, right after the discovery, some of the scrolls were seized. The Vatican kept them locked away for decades. Only at the end of the century were most of them finally revealed. But the question remained, why hide them for so long? Perhaps because the war of light and darkness sounded too much like today. Read its description. On the side of light stand the sons of the covenant, fighting for truth. On the side of darkness, the nations of the world, united against it. The Essenes believed this scenario was inevitable. They prepared for it, shaping their own community with strict discipline, purity, and expectation of the end. Now recall today's headlines. We see the world dividing into blocks again. NATO against the alliance of Russia, Iran, and China. The United States and the European Union against the rest of the world that rejects their rules. The global South against the global North. Is this not the same pattern? The world dividing into sons of light and sons of darkness, each side convinced it alone defends the truth. The prophets warned of this thousands of years ago. In the Qumran scrolls there is one chilling detail. They say the war will be all-encompassing. It will touch not only armies, but economies, faith, and daily life. The enemy will not only be outside, but within. Today that sounds disturbingly familiar. Wars of the 21st century are not only tanks and missiles. They are sanctions, information warfare, battles for the human mind. In social media, wars are fought for the hearts of millions. In banks, wars rage over data. In parliaments, laws are passed that decide which side you stand on. The world has become a battlefield where there are no neutrals. The archives show a very different picture. We are told the world is becoming united, globalized, civilized. But the Qumran texts say the world is splitting in two, and that split cannot be stopped. The war of light and darkness declares that the end will come when darkness gains the upper hand. And at that very moment, God will intervene. The greatest crisis will signal the final end. Today we see darkness rising in the form of war, corruption, and moral decay. Is this not a sign that the scenario has already begun? Official statements are nothing but a curtain. Politicians promise peace, yet arm themselves to the teeth. Churches preach love, yet stay silent about real prophecy. Media assures us of progress, yet reality looks like preparation for a global conflict. This is exactly what the Essenes wrote: when all proclaim peace and safety, then war will come. And now, my question to you. What if we are already living in the time of this war? It has not yet taken its final form, but the signs are everywhere. The division of the world into blocks. New alliances called historic, but in truth they are only steps toward the great confrontation. When it repeats, the end draws near. At the close of the text, the Essenes wrote, the final war will last 40 years. That number may be taken literally or symbolically. But the essence remains: they were certain the war was inevitable, and they prepared in advance. Today, great powers also prepare. They build armies. They forge new alliances. They shift their economies onto military rails. The world moves slowly, but relentlessly, toward the very scenario written 2 millennia ago on fragile scrolls near the Dead Sea. This document changes everything. There is a forgotten book once considered sacred by the ancient Jews, but later branded a dangerous apocryphon by both church and rabbinic leaders. It is the Book of Jubilees. Some call it the Little Genesis. Why? Because it retells the story from the creation of the world to the days of Moses, but in a completely different framework. At its heart lies something you will not find in the biblical canon: a different calendar. The Jubilees divided time into cycles of 49 years. These were sacred periods when order had to be restored, land returned to its rightful owners, slaves set free, debts forgiven. In other words, God defined time not merely as the movement of the sun and moon, but as a system of spiritual and social laws. The church and the rabbis removed this text because it threatened their structures of power. If one followed Jubilees, then every empire would be forced to admit, its control is temporary, its authority not eternal. And above all, that a human being does not belong to the system, but belongs to God. The Book of Jubilees explains, true time cannot be rewritten. Humanity may create its own calendars, but God's order will break through in the end. It sounds like theology. Yet look at our present world. We too have built our own alternative calendar. Now our days and years are defined not only by astronomy, but by digital systems. Your existence is confirmed not by heaven, but by registries. You exist only if your name is in the database. If not, you are erased. Is this not a modern version of the Book of Life and the Book of Death? Today governments and corporations build global databases. Digital passports are becoming the norm. Europe implements a single electronic ID without which travel is impossible. China creates a social credit score that measures every life in numbers. The United States develops digital identities through private corporations. It is all called progress. But in reality, it is a new calendar of control. Now your life is measured not in years and jubilees, but in logins, passwords, and electronic marks. Picture this: in ancient times, a jubilee year meant debts forgiven, slaves freed, land restored, order renewed. Now imagine the 21st century, the system runs in reverse. Debts are never canceled, they multiply. A person is born with a digital account, and that account binds them forever. If the Book of Jubilees taught that time is the mercy of God, today's calendar teaches that time is a debt you must always repay. That thought is chilling, because it reads like today's news. There is more. The Jubilees say that angels record every day of a person's life. Once this sounded mystical. Yet today, every day is truly recorded. We leave digital traces in our phones, banks, and social networks. Every action becomes a mark in the system. And if once the text was feared because it revealed God's true order, now the danger lies elsewhere. Humanity has created its own artificial book of life. In this new book, you exist only when your code is confirmed. Politicians say digital identity is the future. But through the lens of Jubilees, it looks like an usurpation of God's right. For only He decides when your life begins and ends. Only He keeps the true calendar. Now the system seeks to claim that role. Even the churches no longer speak of this. Modern geopolitics also looks like a struggle of calendars. Europe insists on its digital order. China declares it will build its own. The United States develops a parallel system. And it resembles the ancient dispute, whose calendar is true? Then, they argued over sun and moon. Now, over servers and databases. And as in the past, victory will not go to the one who builds the most precise calendar, but to the one who gains power over humanity. That is why the Book of Jubilees was called dangerous. Because it reminded us, time is not the instrument of the state or the church. Time belongs to God. And no empire can make it its own. But today, humanity has forgotten. We live under a digital calendar that defines who you are, and who you will be tomorrow. And if the system decides to erase your name, it is as though you no longer exist. So now the question. If once God established the Jubilee as a year of freedom, but today the system sets its own Jubilees of control, what does this mean for us? Is it not the sign that we already live in the last days, when mankind willingly hands over the right to its own life to another calendar? When it repeats, history draws to its end. This is why we must read the forbidden texts. Because they open our eyes. They show that the world walks the same path as the empires of the past. Only now, instead of temples and priests, we have servers and bureaucrats. Yet the principle is unchanged. Power seeks to rewrite time. But no one can rewrite the calendar of God. Among all the apocrypha, there is one category of texts that sounds especially haunting. They are called the books of records. They declare that every human being must be written in a heavenly register. If your name is there, you live. If it is not, you vanish. The rabbis knew these traditions. In ancient prayers for Yom Kippur, there are words, "Write us in the book of life." This was not a metaphor. It was a direct expression of the belief that somewhere there exists a heavenly list where the destiny of each soul is decided. And among the Apocrypha there appears a mysterious text sometimes called by scholars the secret Book of Israel. In it, the theme is revealed with striking clarity. It declares that at the end of time there will be two books, the Book of Life and the Book of Death. And the ultimate drama of the last days will be decided by one question: whose name remains, and whose is erased. This text never entered the canon. Because it showed too plainly that a person's fate does not depend on belonging to a state or a temple, but on whether their name is written in the book kept by God Himself. For both religious and political powers, that was far too dangerous. And yet, even if the text was hunted and destroyed, the idea survived. It passed through the centuries. Today it resounds louder than ever before. Look at our world. Modern humanity also depends on registries. If your name is in the database, you exist. You can access banks, travel, receive medical care. If you are deleted, you vanish. You cannot buy a ticket, you cannot get help, you cannot even prove who you are. We ourselves have created a digital version of the Book of Life and the Book of Death. In Europe, electronic passports are being introduced. In Israel, biometric identification is mandatory. In China, more than 1 billion people live under a social credit system. Even in the United States and Latin America, digital IDs are being rolled out. Everywhere you go, the system asks, "Who are you?" Prove it. Only then does it allow you to exist. The secret Book of Ezra declares, in the last days, humanity will be judged by whether their name remains in the register. Today that no longer sounds like theology, it sounds like plain reality. This line chills the soul, because it reads like today's news. Now imagine. In ancient times, the priest decided whether your name belonged to the community. Today, an official, or an algorithm, decides whether your name belongs in the database. In ancient times, people prayed to be written into the book of life. Today, people stand in lines waiting for their ID to be confirmed by servers. Is it not strange that we have built exactly what the forbidden texts once warned about? There is another disturbing detail. In the secret Book of Ezra it is written that in the last days some names will be erased deliberately. Not because the person sinned, but because the system will declare them undesirable. This means that in the final act of history, not all disappear because of their own mistakes, some will disappear by the decision of power. Now recall today's sanctions lists. The blocking of social media accounts. The freezing of bank accounts. Is this not the echo of that very idea? Even the churches remain silent on this. Geopolitics sharpens the picture. Nations now weaponize registries. Sanctions decide who may exist in the global economy and who is erased. International agreements are built on a single principle: if you are with us, your name is on the list; if you are against us, you are gone. The secret Book of Ezra declares, the last battle will not be fought on open fields, but in the books. There it will be decided who remains and who is erased. And we see that very thing unfolding. So let me ask you, if modern humanity exists only when its name is confirmed by a server, is this not already a form of divine judgment? Or perhaps it is no longer God's judgment, but humanity's own system trying to claim divine power? If this is true, then we live in the age when spiritual prophecy has become political reality. That is why this text was called dangerous. Because it reminded us, no state has the right to decide who exists and who does not. That right belongs only to God. But we have surrendered it to the system. And now our names are no longer written by quill on parchment. They are stored in electronic spreadsheets, in codes, in digital keys. And if tomorrow an algorithm chooses to erase them, for the world, we will simply cease to exist. This document is unlike the others. It does not speak of angels or of wars. It speaks of names. Of the very fact of human existence. And that makes it more frightening than any other apocryphon. Because it reveals the simplest yet most dangerous mechanism of power, to decide whose name remains, and whose is erased. And that is why it was hidden. There are texts you read and feel, this was written for today. The Apocalypse of Baruch is one of them. It was composed after the fall of Jerusalem, as people tried to understand, why did God allow the temple to be destroyed? Why did his people become exiles? Why did foreign empires reign over the holy city? Baruch, the disciple of the prophet Jeremiah, gave one clear answer: no empire is eternal. Even the mightiest nation will fall if it builds its power against the law of God. At the heart of the book lies a haunting image. Baruch sees a tree growing high into the heavens. Its crown is majestic, but slowly it begins to wither from the top down. The leaves turn yellow, the branches die, and the tree fades away. The prophet explains, this is the fate of empires. They always begin in strength, they rise tall, but from within they rot, and their fall is certain. Does this image not remind you of our time? Today we watch old empires crack at the seams. The dollar loses its absolute dominance. the European Union struggles with crises, economic and political alike. Russia wages war, trying to revive past glory, but its roots are eaten away by sanctions and demographic decline. China grows, yet its system rests on fear and censorship. These are the very trees that once seemed eternal. And already, their crowns begin to wither. Baruch wrote, "The end of empires is not chance, but the law of history." God grants nations their time. They rise, they rule, they grow proud. But when the cup overflows, fall comes. History confirms his words. Assyria vanished. Babylon was destroyed. Rome, which seemed invincible, crumbled under the blows of the barbarians. The Ottoman Empire, the British Empire, all fell at the very moment they appeared strongest. Why then was this book hidden? Because it struck at the heart of every political ideology. It reminded kings and rulers alike, even the greatest empire is temporary. And to the powerful, that sounded like an insult. So the text was erased from the canon. But that did not make it less true. Modern events echo the prophecy. The world has split into blocks. The United States and its allies struggle to preserve the order built after the Second World War. China and Russia strive to forge a new world center. But instead of stability, we see struggle. And this struggle resembles exactly what Baruch described as the slow withering of the tree. Every branch of conflict is a new crack in the crowns of empires. The Book of Baruch holds another truth: the end of one empire always gives rise to another. But none will last forever. And at last there must come a moment when human empires exhaust themselves. Then will arrive a new order, not human, but divine. This means that the entire chain of collapses, from Assyria to Rome, from Rome to our day, has been only preparation for the final fall. Look at the global economy. Nations pile up debts, print money, create illusions of stability. But does this not look like a tree still green outside, yet rotting within? One storm is enough, and it falls. In the 20th century we saw the collapse of the Soviet Union. It seemed mighty, yet it crumbled within a few short years. Are we not seeing the same pattern again, with other giants? The church and the politicians remain silent about the apocalypse of Baruch. Because in it there are no promises of peace or stability. There is only one message: empires are doomed. And today it sounds not like mystical metaphor, but like political forecast. This text was rejected because it was too honest. And now the question: if the tree of modern empires has already begun to wither, what comes next? Will the storm be a new war that finally breaks it? Will it be an economic collapse that reduces nations to ruins? Or will it be moral decay, corroding even the strongest systems from within? When it happens, the world will enter a new era. And then we will see that Baruch's prophecy was not just ancient allegory, but a precise description of history itself. No empire is eternal. This is the truth that rulers tried to hide. But now it is spoken again. And we see its fulfillment with our own eyes. When we hear the word Messiah, most imagine a gentle shepherd preaching peace and love. That is the picture the official church has given us, a symbol of humility, submission, forgiveness. But behind the canon lie other texts. And in them, a very different image emerges. In the apocrypha, the Messiah appears not only as a shepherd, but as a warrior. Not only as a preacher, but as a judge. He comes not only to teach, but to punish. His hands are not only for blessing, but also for the sword. These texts were forbidden because they shattered the convenient cult of submission. They reminded us, the Messiah is not weakness. He is power, power that casts down empires and judges them. In certain ancient manuscripts, the Messiah is described leading an army. He marches into battle against the kings of the earth. His sword blazes, his word strikes like a weapon. This is not the soft image painted in Sunday schools. It is the image of revolution, of judgment, of the end of history. Why was this dangerous? Because if people believed in such a Messiah, they would never consent to be obedient slaves. They would realize faith is not only about surrender, it is also about resistance. Today, this forbidden image rises again in another form. Look at politicians who step forward as saviors. Each one promises a new order. Each declares, "I will save you from chaos." They present themselves as messianic figures before the nations. But their promises always lead to new chains. These are the modern messiahs of politics. They promise peace, but bring wars. They swear justice, but build systems of control. And from this image comes a chill. What we see is not biblical fulfillment, but parody. The apocryphal texts about the Messiah speak of judgment, dividing peoples and nations. It sounds like the final line, who stands for truth, and who against. In the 21st century, we see something similar, the world divided into blocks, leaders vowing to judge others, to punish, to impose their order. Sometimes even with biblical language on their lips. Is this not a modern imitation of what the prophets described thousands of years ago? In the forbidden texts, the Messiah comes to topple empires. He does not negotiate, he does not form alliances, he does not seek compromise. He comes as the end of every treaty, the judgment upon the system. That is why the church hid these writings. Because it was too easy to see in them a dangerous call: do not accept the rule of power, prepare for its collapse. Even in churches today, this is never spoken. Now look at our present age. Nations create their own messiahs, leaders who claim they will bring salvation. Each people has its own savior. But the truth is that these figures only uphold the imperial system. They are part of it, not its alternative. And this is why the forbidden image of the Messiah matters. It reminds us, true deliverance will not come from a politician. It will come when human empires themselves fall. There is another disturbing aspect. In some apocrypha it is written, the Messiah will come when the world has first believed in false saviors. When people have chosen their messiahs among kings and rulers. Only then will the true one arrive. If so, do we not now see that very moment? A world waiting for a new savior, and instead receiving dictators, wars, and control? In this sense, the forbidden texts sound not only prophetic, but exposing. They uncover not just the past, but the present. They reveal the danger is not that the Messiah is too severe. The danger is that we have replaced him with images of political idols. History repeats, nations seek again a king who will solve every problem. But the true judgment still lies ahead. And now, the central question, are we ready for the Messiah as judge and warrior? Or have we grown so accustomed to the actor messiahs that we will not even recognize the true one when he comes? This question cannot be avoided. Because if the forbidden texts are right, the Messiah will not arrive as the image shown in soft paintings. He will come as a storm. And then, there will be no time left to choose. There is a theme that runs through all of Scripture but becomes most frightening in the Apocrypha, the mark. A sign that in the last days will determine who has the right to live within the system, and who will be erased from it. John wrote of this mark in Revelation, no one will be able to buy or sell except those who have the seal on the forehead or on the hand. But the idea appeared earlier, in the Jewish Apocrypha. They say that in the final days, people will receive a mark of belonging, to light or to darkness. And this mark will be decisive. The rabbis tried to interpret it symbolically. But the texts remain too direct. They describe a situation where the very possibility of existence depends on the seal. Without it, a person becomes an outcast, as though they do not exist at all. In ancient times this seemed like myth. Today, it is technology. Look at our age. Biometric passports. digital identifications. QR codes. In China, billions confirm their existence daily through a phone. In Europe, a digital document is being introduced without which transport and services are off limits. In Latin America, digital wallets are tested that can be blocked in a second. It all looks like the modern version of that same mark. It is no longer symbolic. It is real. Picture a simple situation. You enter a store, without your phone or your ID, they will not serve you. You try to board a plane, the system scans your QR code. You want to receive your salary, but your digital wallet is blocked. What is this if not the mark without which no one can buy or sell? And the most chilling part, this system is accepted voluntarily. People place the seal on themselves, believing it to be convenience. From this comes a cold feeling. The ancient texts looked like warnings. Our present looks like their fulfillment. The Jewish apocrypha describe how the mark will divide people. Some will receive the sign of light, others the sign of darkness. It meant not only control, but choice, who serves the truth, and who serves the system. Today that division is visible too. Some are willing to live in total control so long as they have comfort. Others protest, but become outcasts. Already it is clear, conflict is inevitable. Even the churches do not speak of this. Geopolitics only intensifies the picture. Nations rush to be the first to set a global standard of digital identification. The European Union prepares a mandatory electronic passport. China pushes its social score. The United States and international corporations create systems for entire continents. And in this race, we see not only competition for markets, but for the seal itself. For whoever controls the mark, controls the person. There is another disturbing detail. Some apocrypha say that the mark will not be imposed by force, but received with joy. Because the system will persuade people that without it life is impossible. And are we not seeing exactly this now? People rush to register new digital IDs, delighted that everything is now on the phone. They call it freedom. But in truth, it is a new slavery. History repeats. What the prophets described as a warning is today offered as a benefit. Now ask yourself. If today's mark is a digital passport or a biometric code, what comes next? Will it take a physical form, an implant, a chip, a tattoo? Or does it no longer matter, because the fact of control is already in place? We were never told the truth. We were told these are merely new technologies. But the ancient texts warned, the mark is always about power. And when the majority accepts it, the finale begins. That is why these apocrypha were excluded from the canon. They were too direct. They exposed not only the past, but the future. And today, as we watch the news, we understand why the authorities feared these texts. Because they sound as if they describe the 21st century. This document changes the very way we see prophecy. It shows that what was once taken as metaphor has become technology. And we already live inside that reality. All the previous books were fragments, echoes of ancient prophecies. But imagine they are joined into one scroll. That all these images, Enoch, Ezra, the Essenes of Qumran, the Jubilees, Baruch, the Apocrypha about the Messiah and the Mark, are not separate stories but parts of a single text. We can call this text, symbolically, the October Scroll. Because it is in October, again and again, that events have unfolded which changed the course of history. Remember. In October 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution overturned the world and created an empire that later became gulags and wars. In October 1929, the Great Depression began, shaking the United States and the global economy. In October 1973, the Yom Kippur War erupted in the Middle East. And each time, October became the moment when history turned a darker page. October is the month when the scroll of history unrolls. It is symbolic that many archival revelations also came in autumn. The Qumran scrolls began to emerge after being locked away for years. Certain Vatican documents were declassified in October. Political treaties called historic were often signed in autumn, as the world entered a new phase. It feels like a strange script, as though in this season God allows a glimpse into a hidden archive. The October scroll is a metaphor for all prophecies converging into one point. And that point is now. We see the fall of empires, as in Baruch. We see Ezra's eagle spreading its wings over the world. We see the war of light and darkness described by the Essenes. We see the new calendar of control from the Book of Jubilees. We see the books of life and death from the secret Book of Israel. We see messianic leaders who in truth bring new wars. And finally, we see the mark without which no one can buy or sell. Is this not the unrolling of a single scroll? Geopolitics confirms the picture. In October 2023, the Middle East flared with war again. In October 2024, world leaders signed new alliances that seemed to promise peace, but in reality meant deeper instability. And this is only the beginning. October becomes a symbol not by chance. It reminds us history has its breaking points. And in these moments, the scroll unrolls faster. Today the world feels as though we stand before the final chapter. That feeling grows stronger with every new event. Sanctions. Wars. Digital passports. Economic crises. All of it seems like pieces of one vast picture. This is why the idea of the October scroll is so powerful. It gathers scattered texts into a single investigation. Why is this never spoken of officially? Because to do so would mean admitting, the world lives by a script written thousands of years ago. It would mean confessing that progress is an illusion. That real history is not about the development of civilizations, but about the repetition of the same prophecy moving toward its finale. This terrifies both politicians and churches. And now the question. If all these books truly form one scroll, what happens when it is fully unrolled? Are we already on the last pages? Is the October we live through now only the prologue to an even greater upheaval? When history repeats too precisely, it is always a sign we are near the end. The October scroll is not just ancient texts. It is the mirror of our present. It shows, we already live in a time when all prophecies awaken. And each of us must decide, do we see in this only coincidence, or do we understand that the script is truly unfolding? Because the truth is, the scroll unrolls whether we wish it or not. We have walked the path through forbidden books. From Enoch and Ezra to the Qumran scrolls and the Jubilees. From Baruch, who saw the end of empires, to the apocrypha about the Messiah and the mark. All these texts have come together into a single archive, which we called the October scroll. And it revealed one truth: the history of mankind is not random progress, but a script repeating again and again. In the Book of Enoch, we saw the fall of angels who gave humanity knowledge that turned against them. And today we see the same, in the form of technologies that become weapons. In the Apocalypse of Ezra, we saw the eagle devouring nations. And today that image mirrors modern empires tearing at each other, ripping the world apart. In the Qumran scrolls, we read of the war between light and darkness. And today that war is fought not only with armies, but with economies, media, and ideologies. In the Book of Jubilees, we saw an alternative calendar, the divine order that humanity now tries to replace with digital registries. In the secret Book of Israel, we discovered the books of life and death, and we realized that modern databases have become their reflection. In Baruch, we saw the tree withering from the top down. And today we witness empires losing their strength, even when they appear unshakable. In the forbidden texts about the Messiah, we saw an image of a warrior and judge. And in today's leaders, who promise salvation, we see only his shadow. And finally, in the apocrypha about the mark, we found a warning of a seal on the forehead and the hand. And today we see digital identity becoming the new seal. The October scroll is unrolling right now. This is not a metaphor, but a reality visible in every headline. History is moving faster than ever. The events of our age look like the very lines the prophets wrote thousands of years ago. But now the great question rises, what do we do with this knowledge? Most will do nothing. They will say, these are coincidences. They will return to their routines, believing progress is the only law. They will close the scroll and forget it. But some of you will not be able to forget. Because once you see the parallels, you cannot unsee them. And then a choice appears, either accept that we are living in the days of prophecy fulfilled, or keep your eyes closed until the scroll is fully unrolled. I will not give a final answer. This mystery remains open. And what about you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you see in this prophecy the same signs I do? And one more thing. If you noticed errors in the text or in the narration, forgive me. This dubbing was created with artificial intelligence, and some details may have been distorted. Write about mistakes in the comments, I will correct them in the next videos.